To have you all here on this Sunday. Sorry, I was having a little technical difficulties beforehand. Um, okay, sorry. I'm looking at the chat here. You're saying no sound. I just started talking. I was trying to get my my stream. It says I'm recording, but it was not saying live, so I don't know what was going on there. So I was trying to fix that. But I am here. Thank you all for joining me. So happy to have you here on Father's Day today. Happy Sunday, everyone. So yeah, I'm running this through two streaming programs. So yeah, I'm still getting used to that. So I apologize for those aspects here. But I'm so happy to have all 21 of you hanging out with me today. So I'm going to do a little freestyle commentary on The Flash. If any of you saw my my late appearance over on Midnight's Edge After Dark, you will know that while I was in a Zoom meeting with some colleagues, we ended up seeing one of them had a digital copy of The Flash that they shared with us that we all watched together, and we were not impressed. It was quite something of an experience. Glad I didn't go to the theaters to see it, because that would have also been boring. But we saw the whole thing, credits, post credit, mid credit scenes, all that stuff. And yeah, it's a mess of a film. So I'm going to do my best to try and break it down. I have a whole bunch of notes. They're in random order as they came to me as I was thinking. I usually organize them later, but it's been quite hectic on my end. Not just with trying to reconcile things going on with the current writer's strike that is closing in on its second month, but also just my thanks to everyone who's supported me on Patreon and everyone who has hired me for consults. I've been so grateful to read your work and provide notes and really help you guys shape up your scripts. I see a great deal of potential with all of you, and I look forward to seeing what happens in the future with those projects. But today we're going to talk about The Flash, a little bit of the history of The Flash. For those that may not be fully aware, The Flash was a film technically ordered by Kevin Tsujihara when he took over Warner Brothers in 2013, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong on this in the chat, but it was, I think, mid-year or early fall he took over in 2015. Might have been earlier, but I'm going off of memory here. And one of the things I do vividly remember is Warner Brothers' disappointment in the reception of Man of Steel, even though it did take in quite a bit of cash, like over 600 million worldwide, if I'm not mistaken, or something of that nature. But they were hoping for a lot more money, and Kevin Tsujihara wanted to go in a different direction and catch up to Marvel and get things moving. For some strange reason, he preferred to stick with Zack Snyder to do what was initially announced as Superman v Batman, and then a couple years later changed to Batman v Superman, because Batman is a more successful title. The reason being is that Barry Mayer, who is the head of Warner Brothers prior to Tsujihara from 2001 to 2013, he oversaw the Harry Potter films. He oversaw the Dark Knight trilogy. He was considered pretty good for keeping Warner Brothers in the conversation and competitive among the studios, but he exited for whatever reasons he had. Kevin Tsujihara took over, and he was a lot of people were not thrilled with Man of Steel, even though it has its fans, and I very much respect the people that have his fans. It was not what Warner Brothers wanted. They wanted a bigger return. They wanted more investment. They wanted some of that Marvel popularity. And so they started rushing things out. So again, for some reason, they kept with Zack Snyder, I think, which is kind of rare, because usually when a new studio head comes in and they want to go in another direction, they wipe the slate clean. Like they do. They get rid of all of it. I've seen many people lose a lot of projects, especially at Warner Brothers when Tsujihara came in. A lot were scrapped. And But he bet on that horse again, and Batman v Superman performed a little better than Man of Steel, but still not to the numbers that they wanted. And by that point, they were already planning to do a Flashpoint film to sort of reset and redirect their DC films, because that's what it was at the time. They were called DC films. There was never a DCEU. That was invented by a journalist to make fun of Warner Brothers not coming up with a cohesive cinematic universe. And a lot of people fell for it. And I don't begrudge you if you were one of them. But it never existed, still doesn't exist, never been registered, not trademarked, not anything. Just a little shorthand. But yeah, it was Kevin Tsujihara who wanted to do all this types of stuff. And Kevin was part of the head of Warner Brothers up until 2019. And a lot of people got into making the Flash. The first director was Seth Grahame-Smith, who won the role of director in 2013 with the hiring of Kevin Tsujihara, and he was there for a number of years. After him, it was Rick Famuyiwa, and he was there for a short time, a couple of years. Then you had two more directors who worked in pair, which was John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. Now, these are the guys who most likely did a majority of the filming, and some of what they shot should be in this version of The Flash. I won't know 100% for sure, of course, because it's been muddled up. But they were working on the film for 2 years, from 2017 to 2019, essentially. And then when Tsujihara was Me Too'd out of his position, and then Sarnoff came in, that's when Andy Muschietti came in to direct in 2019. So he's only done about a year and a half of actual possible filming and directing and whatnot, and spent the rest of that time in post. So yeah, that's a lot of directors. That's 5 directors in a 10-year span. For a film, which is not a good sign in Hollywood. You usually don't have, especially when they've also done principal photography for a majority of those directors, did principal photography at points. In fact, some of the Michael Keaton stuff is probably done by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein prior, because the pandemic hit in 2020. and a lot of that Keaton stuff was announced prior to Spider-Man No Way Home. So yeah, we don't know all the details yet. I'm certain there are a lot of scenes that were reshot again to give Muschietti, the director, credit, just like with Richard Lester had to reshoot parts of Superman 2 in order to maintain his principal credit. But unfortunately, yeah, there was a lot of weird things going on over at DC. And it was, what's also kind of fascinating is the amount of people who are heads of DC films. So Walter Hamada was one of the ones that a lot of people like to reference. He was there for quite some time. He was essentially appointed in January of 2018. So he's appointed prior to Ann Sarnoff getting in there, and he, unfortunately, despite whatever your opinions are of him, he oversaw some of the more profitable DC films of that time. He oversaw Aquaman. He oversaw Shazam. He oversaw Joker. So he was in good views with a lot of people at Warner Brothers Pictures. Prior to him, if I'm not mistaken, was gotta remember. Man, going through. Let me go through my notes here. I apologize, everyone. Just there's a lot of changes, but yeah, there's a lot of different people. So we're going to let's see here. It was so you had John Berg, who was working alongside Jeff Johns, and they were the chief heads of DC Films and DC Entertainment Film Division prior to Walter Hamada. So those guys were from 2016 to 2018. They were the ones that kind of screwed around with Zack Snyder's Justice League and did everything they could to make sure Wonder Woman was a success. So those guys are pretty contentious. I think Jeff Johns should stick more to writing comic books and get out of the live action or animated entertainment stuff. He's it's not his forte. So I would had him over there. And prior to them was Charles Roven. Charles Roven was there from 2011 2016. He was the guy that was thrown in with quite a surprise with regards to Superman, and that was finding out that the rights to the character of Superman, the film rights, were going to vanish if he didn't make a Superman film, even though he had just seen, or he'd come in only a few years after Warner Brothers did Superman Returns. And he, like a lot of people, assumed that they'd still retain the rights for a number of years after that. But apparently in the contract with the Siegel family, that was not the case. So he, along with Barry Mayer, had to rush in a Superman film. And that's how we got to this point. Basically, Panic created the mess that was DC Films that we've been experiencing for the past 10 years. Essentially, that's what the case is. Handled by a pair of people that have not been with the company for at least 5 years. And it's kind of fitting that panic and messiness is how this franchise is going to end. Undoubtedly with the Flash, who knows what the Blue Beetle will be doing this summer. I hope it at least is a different tone and a bit more jovial for audiences than what we got with the Flash. Well, definitely more tolerable. I mean, the lead Zolo from Cobra Kai is far more pleasurable to watch than Ezra Miller. And then, of course, it bows out with Aquaman. So that is going to be one heck of a very cathartic year where we can say, oh gosh, thank Yoda, it's all done. And then we can start resuming our stress and anxiety over if they're going to get their next attempt at it right. So we'll have to wait and see. Potential is there, which is unfortunate because there's no potential left in this iteration of DC Films. And may it rest in peace. So with all that said, let's get into how the Flash actually starts as a story. So it opens up with an action set piece that has a lot of similar beats to what I recognized from Shazam! Fury of the Gods. In fact, it even ends on a bridge that looks a lot like the one that was used in Shazam! Fury of the Gods. So I'm seeing a lot of derivative aspects already within the first 20 minutes of the movie, which you don't really want. I mean, if anyone had seen it and you're watching the set pieces there and you see where it ends and you see the money shots of the superheroes standing, shoulder to shoulder, what have you, you're looking at this and thinking, wow, this is kind of deja vu. I could have sworn I saw something very similar to this with Shazam. The only difference being is that the bridge didn't collapse. So there was that. But let's get into the finer details. So it opens up with Barry. He's running towards a hospital that has recently been robbed of a virus of sorts. And the building's not doing so well. And he's being coordinated by Alfred to keep it standing, to make it work. Keep it stable and rescue people out of there and help the first responders and whatnot. And then Batman is chasing the bad guys in his Batplane. And then for no reason at all, he decides to get out of the Batplane on the motorcycle, where he has to weave between cars that will slow him down from his pursuit, as opposed to using the very Batplane that is clearly small enough to travel above streets. So avoiding everything so he can make a straight beeline for the Humvee that these bad guys are escaping in. He doesn't use the efficient means. No, he decides, I'm going to use the Batcycle toy and then drive, weave in, try and latch on to them with my grappler, cables and whatnot and bring them to a stop. But at this point, this would be the fourth version of Batman we're seeing within the DC films. You're asking, well, wouldn't Batman's plane have those grapplers too? Couldn't he just like use a fishing technique and hook them from above and then pull them off the road and fly them over to Blackgate Prison or something? Because that's what Batman would do. He'd be very efficient. He wouldn't say, no, I'm going to use my toy to make this harder for me and chase them that way through a very elaborate, car chase in the downtown city. So that's, I mean, didn't make sense. I mean, if you wanted to have a set piece where Batman is chasing someone through a flying machine and he's gaining pursuit, and you're saying, you know what, the flying stuff might be too easy for him, let's get him out of that. You don't go with the character volunteering himself to make it difficult for him. It just doesn't work. It's inauthentic. It's betrayal of the character. It's a betrayal of general protagonists anyways. Protagonists and people themselves, we don't want to take the more difficult path. If there's an easier option with the same results, we will go for that because it's all about achieving the results. Same thing applies to movies. So if you wanted to get him out of that bat plane and drop into, a motorcycle and car chase in the main city here, just have the bad guys with some rocket propelled grenade launchers just shoot the bat plane out of the sky. So he has to get out of it. I mean, come on, it's cause and effect, right? Don't make things, you as a writer want to make things more difficult for your character. And you also want to make sure it's dramatic in doing so. You don't do that by just having a character go, yes, this easy flying machine that I've got, I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to drop out and play on the bat cycle thing, or never have brought in the bat plane in the first place. Just have him already on his bat cycle chasing him down. Don't even bring in the option of that. But unfortunately, there was not much forethought in this. This was a very panicked made movie. It made the set piece with Ben Affleck's Batman very boring and stupid. His costume, finally got a clear look at it, not so much in the trailers beforehand, but in this one we've got a clear look at it, and it looks terrible. Looks like an off the rack jumpsuit with some fiberglass hockey pads sewn over top of it. The mask is really puffy. Looks kind of like someone filled it up with water, and it's just kind of swollen around Ben Affleck's face. Didn't look well. Pretty horrible, unfortunately. And then we get over to Barry as he's continuing to fix up the hospital, tie off some sort of chemical leak or what have you. Alfred warns him that the building is going to collapse, and Barry's like, oh, I don't think it's going to collapse. And yes, it does. And we get into a very interesting concept for a set piece, but a terrible execution. And that is, for some strange reason, on one of the higher floors, there is a nursery, and one of the overseeing nurses can't seem to get out to help rescue the children in this calamity, and the people on the other side of the doors are banging on it, trying to open it. Not any of them with enough weight or even a combined mass to knock the door down physically. None of them think to grab the fire axe, which there's a number of them on every floor of every hospital, along with emergency ramps, which are basically these kind of like these slip and slides essentially that are attached to the railings that you just detach, and then you open them up and they fold over up the stairwell, and you can slide down the stairs. There's also fire hoses. There's a whole lot of safety stuff on every floor in a hospital. If you've ever walked a hospital, you'll see a lot of them. Some of them you could kind of see visually to have access to. Others are put in areas that are prohibited from general patients or people within the hospital. But they're anyone who's working there and anyone who's in there that has the ability, if they have to, they can find a way to use those and help people. That's the whole goal of them. It's part of their health and safety requirements. But anyways, we have this convoluted thing where they can't get out. The entire glass walls, which is also another weird thing for a hospital to have completely glass walls, shatter, and a dozen babies are tossed out. And what we end up having is a great set piece. How does the Flash save a dozen falling babies and one nurse? And how does he do so without liquefying them? And sadly, the creative aspect of it was completely ignored by the filmmakers involved, because what Barry does is he, at super speeds, catches all the kids, puts them on a gurney, lands them safely. One kid he throws into a detached microwave because reasons, failing to realize that much like if you're a person in a falling elevator, the elevator is going to go down a little faster than you, and you're most likely going to be thrashed about inside the elevator. And a newborn being thrashed about inside a microwave is lethal, and it is disgusting, and they're trying to frame it as charming and silly, but it's absolutely terrifying. And the nurse who's screaming at the end is completely correct to do so. But the reason being is that there's no verisimilitude to it. You don't believe that it is happening at all. You can't believe that it is happening at all, because the fun aspects with the Flash is that you have this guy who can travel at super speeds, even break the sound barrier, break the light barrier, move all around. There are still certain aspects of physics that are in place, such as Newton's second law, which is every action has an equal and opposite reaction, which means that if Barry were to jump up in the air and kick off a piece of falling debris, it would travel away from him at the exact same speed that he was traveling in the opposite direction. So it'd be like little debris bullets just shooting all around him in various points as he makes his way up to all the kids. Now, the fun problem that a good writer would do is they would acknowledge, hey, the Flash cannot catch these children while he is traveling at super speed. He would have to slow himself down to the same relative speed as the child in order to caress them so that there's no sudden stop. And then he could move them. He could gently sort of move them or ease them into super speed to get them down safely. It's a very simple premise that Richard Donner came in to understand when he was doing Superman's first save of Lois Lane. He was looking at the storyboards and he was realizing, man, if Superman is flying up and Lois Lane is going down and those two collide, Lois would be splattered like she was hitting the sidewalk. How do we stop? How do we fix this? And he came up with the idea of, well, we have the background plates. We can show him going up and we can show her going down. And we'll just use the background plate of her going down. We'll slow it down as Superman comes into frame and catches her. And then we'll make it stop and then we'll make it go up so that it looks like he caught her as she's falling and carefully just kind of like, like as you catch a ball or catch a child, if you're throwing them up in the pool and whatnot, you don't just abruptly catch them. You bring your arms down so that they can slow down. And that's what he did. And then he did it in the reverse. That would be a great thing to do for the Flash because it adds in a certain sense of tension, which is that if he catches the baby in real time, carefully and safely, all the other kids are still falling in real time, which means he is losing valuable seconds to catch the other kids. So he's got to be able to utilize that time he's using in real time, move the kid back to safety at super speed, and then super speed up again, and then stop. And each time he's doing so, those kids are going to be dropping. And it's really the fact that they don't do that, the fact that they don't give you any suspense, the fact they try to make it a comedic scene instead of a very thrilling one. This should be an edge of your seat set piece. And instead, it is played like what they think a Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy scene would be. And it's just really tragic. You also then have a video game technique device, which is Barry has a little energy readout on his wrist that tells him when he needs to eat. So he's also eating various food. Excuse me. He's eating various food from vending machines and things that are falling to charge himself up so he can achieve this. And then they never bring that element back in ever again. He's never hungry ever again. So yeah, he does this horrible thing where in the reality within the own universe of DC, he would be vaporizing those kids. I am certain many fans or detractors of my opinion on this will say, well, no, the Speed Force allows him to surround whatever object he is carrying so that he can capture them at super speed and they not vaporize. Well, that's just one of my other issues with the Flash, especially in recent years, where they invented this Speed Force, which is a very derivative idea. and also takes away all the fun that you can have with a character like the Flash. Because if you need any problem to be solved and you don't know how to write your way out of it, you can just make the Speed Force do it. In which case, now you're not having fun with the character anymore, and you're supplanting this idea to all of his fans, all of his readers, all of his watchers, that everything will always be okay because all they have to do is pull up the magical Deus Ex Machina Speed Force, and problem is solved. So instead of it being a fun device to explore, it has become a crutch, which I knew it was going to become as soon as Mark Waid invented it for the character. I also think the lightning surrounding Barry is also a little bit on the nose. I know he's the Flash, but it's supposed to be like a blink of an eye, not a literal lightning bolt stuff. The static electricity thing and then making a charge, that's fine, sure, whatever. But no, I'm not. Getting off of that point, Barry's been spending his entire life trying to prove that his dad did not kill his mom. And logically, the way a lot of people, a lot of mysteries would explore this is by trying to find out who really killed the mother. Who is the other person? And that brings me into what I'm gonna basically. It buries the lead and the motivation of what the story is. So from that point on, and I was being very charitable with this threshold. From that point on, this movie went from the Flash to the trash. It's just garbage because he is not doing. He is a CSI. He's established as a crime scene investigator, a lab tech, and when it comes to lab techs, the idea is the source of the problem. Where does the evidence point you? And if you're trying to exonerate someone, you need to exonerate them in a way that there's an option of who else could have done it. And Barry at no point ever tries to look for who else could have been there. He doesn't look at anything with regards to footprints, soil samples, breaking and entering, fingerprints on the knob. None of those types of things are ever explored. They're glossed over. Instead, he is relying primarily that just proving his father wasn't the one is good enough and let the person who killed his mom escape justice for the remainder of time. So that is what is the entire crux of the rest of the story. Is he gets this video surveillance footage that has been restored from Wayne Tech. It's supposed to show his father in the aisle exactly when the father said he was there to buy these cans of tomatoes, but he doesn't look up, so his face isn't clear on the security footage, and therefore reasonable doubt still remains that he is not innocent of the crime with which he was charged. I'm also wondering, like, wouldn't he also have like a sales receipt for the can of tomatoes? And sales receipts have time stamped of when the purchase was made. So wouldn't that be evidence sufficient to do that? Even if he paid cash, I guess Henry Allen doesn't want receipts, which is fine, sure. But regardless, that's what it is. And when Barry gets this information, realizes that this new evidence is not going to help in his appeal, he starts to reminisce, and he manages to travel back in time to the previous day, and we get a very creepy floating head of Ezra Miller out of the Speed Force. It's a bit cleaner and less hectic and crazy than the weird Flash cameo that was in Batman v Superman when Bruce Wayne is kind of in his dream state. And it's just very silly. Also, other people have pointed out that it reminds them of the floating head of in Thor: Love and Thunder with the kid talking to Thor. They're not wrong. It's very similar. But he then talks to Bruce about this, about traveling back in time. He even brings up that he did it in Russia, which tells us that this version that we're seeing of Flash is from Zack Snyder's The Snyder Cut, that 4-hour snorefest. Excuse me. And, Bruce Wayne does the thing that every person with a logical mind does, which he says, hey, You don't need to change the past. Don't dwell on it. Just move forward. He also throws in another thing, which is that there's nothing wrong with you and that you're he's kind of implying arrested development with those lines, but really the theme is that, let the tragedies, let your pain, let your successes define you, move forward and do better. Don't try and fix things because the consequences to that could be dire. And of course, Barry doesn't listen to him. You have Iris West, who is brought back from her brief time in the Snyder Cut and Justice League or what have you. She's looking a little larger, and I don't begrudge her. I'm not body shaming or anything of that nature. It's just that they are hiding the fact that she's gotten a little older and gotten a little heavier, but she is charming for the few scenes that she's in, and it's not all that wonderful, unfortunately. But she's one of the things that inspires Barry to still go back in time and fix things. And instead of Barry, and this is the thing that's interesting. So Barry has this ability to go back in time. So if he is trying to exonerate his father and he can go back in time, what is the best evidence that he could get to help exonerate his father? Now, logically, if because all of you here are relatively curious, and you're also very astute, because I've been reading some of the things popping up in the chat, and I will be getting to the chat momentarily. So hang on, guys. I will be getting to you. Logically, you think, well, if he can go back in time and he can go back to any point in time and he can prove that his father didn't kill him, what's the best way to do that? Well, how about identifying who the real killer is? The Flash can do that. He can go back in time. He can wait outside his house around the period with which this person entered and murdered his mother and find out who they are. Even if he's never seen them before, he can at least see who they are, that they're there, follow them to where they are, maybe even use his super speed to, rob, take out his wallet, get his name, address, record it down, put it back, whatever. He could do all those things. Or he could go in there and physically stop him, injure him so that he is now this unconscious attacker in their home. And his mother can call the police and say there's a person tried to attack her and he's been knocked out. And there you go. Bob's your uncle. The killer has been found, or the attempted killer in this version has been found and is now incarcerated. The father doesn't go to jail for a crime he didn't commit, and the mother's alive. But the Flash doesn't do that because the Flash is an idiot. A crime scene investigator that's an idiot. Central City must be a terrible, terrible place to live, because if their police force can't screen out terrible crime scene investigators like Barry Allen in this version, they'll never have a solved case ever. It is absolutely horrendous. But no, he doesn't do that. What he ends up doing is he goes to the grocery store while his mother's shopping and throws in the extra can of tomatoes so that dad doesn't have to go out and get them. Therefore, dad is remaining at home. Therefore, whoever was planning to do a midday time burglary of a home skipped his house and proceeded on to the next one that he thought was available. So who knows what happens? So now here we have the situation where Barry has not only ignored the possibility of a burglar and attempted murder of his mother, but he has also subjugated another house in his neighborhood to being burgled as well, because he didn't find the actual source of the criminal, which is the whole premise of what a mystery is you find the source, you find the perpetrator of the crime with which you're investigating. So this is where the movie is absolute garbage, because he doesn't solve the problem. He just pushes it off. And this is not something that is authentic to a character that has the role of, number one, superhero, number two, a crime scene investigator, an employee at a crime lab. It is absolutely retarded. And I don't care with what YouTube says with that. It is absolutely regressive. It is willfully ignoring the things that could allow for drama. Again, and then you also have Andy Muschietti, and if you're familiar with the Flash, especially in the recent 25 years or so, Eobard Thawne is Reverse Flash. He's from the future. He was inspired to become a Flash like the Flash, but he was also humiliated by the Flash when the Flash came to the future for some reason. And as a result of that, he decides he's going to ruin the Flash. and he's going to erase the Flash from history so that he can be the first Flash and the superhero he wants to be. So he goes back in time and he kills Nora Allen, Barry's mom, and frames his father for doing it. But we never get that in this movie of the Flash. That's completely ignored. Although the director has publicly said in the last 48 hours that Eobard Thawne is the one who killed Nora Allen. But if that were really important, it would be in the movie. And it's not. It's a hanging Chad. And it's sad. And I also think it's also kind of a big misstep, especially for DC itself and the comic book publishing aspect of things, because if Eobard Thawne goes back and changes time and still the Flash remains, the Flash should, by all accounts, go back and stop Eobard Thawne from changing time so that the original timeline, with which many, many readers have experienced for decades, has Barry Allen growing up in a very stable family who just happens to get powers and use them for good. He doesn't have a tragic backstory. He doesn't need to be closer to Batman in the fact that he lost a parent and another one went to jail for it. He was something different and refreshing and more honest to Detective Comics, because for those of you, if you're not a comic book reader, and I don't begrudge you for that, Marvel comics are more jovial and soap opera-y with some very, very dark real life problems. And Detective Comics are more pulpy and they're lighthearted to a degree, because not every superhero within Detective Comics is Batman. Although since the 90s, they've been trying to convince you that they are. Wonder Woman is pretty clever. Superman is very hopeful. Green Lantern is space cops and cool politics, intergalactic politics there. Green Arrow is street level. Blue Beetle is street level. You've got Challenges of the Unknown, which is very like Flash Gordon pulpy-ish, especially with Adam Strange. Like, you've got all these things in different types of subgenres within Detective Comics that say, oh no, Batman is kind of in his own little darker, noir-y, detective, gritty perspective. Everything else is kind of a bit more adventure, romance, fun. They don't deal with the mundane problems or the superficial problems that a lot of the Marvel characters have. They don't have a lot of the money issues that Peter Parker has. And if you're a member of my Patreon, I have this conversation with Jeff from World Class Bullshitters, where we talk about web shooters and Spider-Man, his characters, and the derivatives that are in there. So I recommend you go check that out. It's on the base tier. And I also have a 7-day free trial of that base tier, so you don't have to pay anything if you want to go watch it. So please, I would love for you to check that out. But regardless, the Flash, DC is not always the darker, grittier comic take, nor is it what the MCU is trying to be. It is something more fun and in between, and it has a little bit more earnestness of an approach to things. So what we end up having here is Barry ignores the very principles of what is needed. The filmmakers ignore the very principles of what is needed to tell this story. And as Barry is trying to return to his present, a dark Flash kicks him out of the Speed Force, and he finds himself in 2013. He's unaware that it's 2013, but he ends up trying to catch up with his parents in the most obviously ham-fisted, awkward conversation. He's got this happy family life, and of course, we soon see, as what's shown in the trailers, that other Barry is coming home from college to do laundry, and now those two Barrys have to figure out what's going on. And now the movie stops in what it was trying to do, and it gives us a new origin of the Flash, because Barry, for some reason, is thinking that if he doesn't give his younger self powers, he will not have them in the future. And this is where we get into the tiresome nature of the multiverse and how the filmmakers have now conflated the multiverse with time travel, which is also what the Avengers did as well. So time travel is a really fun story mechanic. It is not easy to do. It is very, very difficult, but it does have value. Some of the most popular science fiction time travel stories that I can reference right now would be Star Trek did it a few times. The Naked Time, they go back in time to solve their problem at the end, because after they cure the the drunken virus that they're getting. They lost their orbit, so they had to reboot the warp core to stabilize themselves, and they get slung back a couple of days in their own timeline. You then have another episode, of Tomorrow Is Yesterday from Star Trek, where they find themselves back in the 1960s, and they accidentally rescue a pilot, captain in the Air Force, I believe, and they have to return him so that he can father a son that will be aboard a rocket that is used for a future space expedition. You then have Assignment Earth, which is a backdoor pilot, where the Enterprise has gone back to observe certain historical events in Earth's history. And then they go back. And then, of course, there's the most famous Star Trek story, Star Trek The Voyage Home, where they have to go back in time, pluck up a couple of whales, bring them back to their present so they can communicate with a probe and correct a mistake that humans of the past had made. Outside of Star Trek, the next one is Back to the Future, which also uses time travel. Of course, it's its entire premise, and the concept being that Marty McFly accidentally screws up his parents meeting and falling in love and has to get them together, or else he and his siblings will no longer exist. And then you have another time travel story, which uses a kind of a time loop paradox to a degree, but it also confines things to a singular timeline, which is The Terminator. Kyle Reese goes back in time to protect Sarah Connor, not knowing that he is the father of the leader of the resistance that has won the war from which he left, and repeats the thing over and over again. And the common thing with all of those episodes and all of those movies is that they play into the fun story aspect of time travel, that time travel has consequences for the time with which you left. And that is really important, is you want to write a story that has consequences for the actions of the characters. I understand the mentality for audiences and also for Hollywood to try and make it more real, more realistic. Let's use real theories from physics to have fun with what's going on. But sadly, the multiverse theory is really is the most theory of theories. Like, there's nothing based in fact. It's about probabilities and how we all make various decisions. And if we made a different decision, that splits off into a different universe. And that decision most likely could have happened, but didn't, at least not from the sole perspective, what have you. It's very, very crazy. In the movie itself, they use spaghetti as an analogy for it. It's not a bad analogy, but it's not time travel. It's multiverse theory. And that's basically what it is. Barry is not actually traveling in time in the way that he thinks he is. The Speed Force is allowing him to enter different universes at different points in time. Some of them will cross over to be the same point, others won't. It's all a mess. Barry isn't actually really changing anything. He is just jumping from dimension to dimension, and in some places he's either replacing himself or not. It's a convoluted mess. It basically means none of the actions he does have any meaning from where he came, just like with Avengers. They left their timeline to grab the Infinity Stones, and whatever timeline they returned to was just an alternate timeline where the Avengers also left. And they're not the exact same. There's going to be subtle differences over and over and over again. And it's going to be infinite, because the moment you establish that every time you jump in time, you're jumping to another universe, there is no way to confirm that you are jumping back to your original one. Because every jump from every point is going to another one, another one, another one. So it's an infinite effect. And that's what Barry is. That's the story of the Flash here. He is going to all of these other timelines over and over and over again. The only thing where he can come back to be consistent is the Speed Force. And it's a very, very messy film from that point, and very, very intolerable. You've got two Ezra Millers with their voice, which is 3 or 4 times more annoying than mine, talking like this, and with a little bit of femininity and a little bit of nasalness. And it's just grating on the senses. Even one of my colleagues, while we were on the Zoom watching it, literally broke and screamed at the movie to shut up when those two Barrys were in their bedroom. So we get a retelling of Barry's origin in this film, and Barry has a fight with himself because younger Barry doesn't want to get electrocuted. And in the process, lightning strikes the chemicals. But Barry, being the Flash, not fast enough to get out of the way to let the chemicals and the bolt of lightning hit his younger self to give him powers. No, it goes through him. He loses a tooth, and the powers are transferred to younger Barry, and older Barry is restored to normal. So now they're switched, and it's pointless. Would have been more interesting, especially if they had the actual causality loop or the cause and effect aspect of time travel, where if Barry did save his mother, and the moment that he did that, he would have been yanked out of the Speed Force, having lost his powers, and would have been in his present time, and it would be all different. That would have been more interesting story to go through. That a bit more traditional to the comic book that it was based off of, and I'll get into the comic book in a few moments. But my gosh, it's just and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. So young Barry gets his new powers. He ends up naked twice, which is twice too many. Don't need to see naked Barry. It's not even done in a comic funny way at all. It's really intolerable. But they see that Zod is here, and that's when Barry realizes, oh yay, it's 2013. We need Superman to stop Zod, because it's going to he's going to take over the world. He's going to terraform it. And through a Google search, to show you how great of a detective Barry is, through a Google search, he finds out that there is no Wonder Woman, there is no Aquaman, there is no Superman, and there's definitely no Cyborg or Cryborg, however you want to word it. But the crazy roommates that Barry has says, oh yeah, but there's a Batman. No one's seen him for years, but he's there. And that's where the Barrys go. They go to the old Tim Burton style Wayne Manor, and they find Batman, who, in a surprising turn of events, has accomplished his mission, that Gotham City is now safe. And instead of Bruce Wayne living a life of accomplishment, maybe starting a family and, building back the thing that the crime of Gotham took from him, he just pulls a Christian Bale times 10, essentially. Christian Bale in The Dark Knight Rises. He lives as a recluse in the manor. He's got scrabby facial hair. He wears pajamas. Doesn't cut his hair. He's kind of smelly, and he sneaks up on people that break into his home and scares them and fights them, as he did with Anne Hathaway there. Michael Keaton does the same thing, only his hair's longer and his beard's longer, and he prefers, and he wears flip-flops. But he has a fight scene with the two Barrys, and the fight scene ends with him missing the younger Barry because of his super speed, hitting his head into the cupboards, telling both Barrys that he owns the house and that he's essentially Bruce Wayne, and then asking if they're hungry. That's your comic beat thing. It's just, and then they just proceed to have a conversation. There's no Bruce Wayne saying, "Get out of my house. What are you doing here? You're trespassing." There's nothing back and forth with regards to the desperation of what the Barrys need from him and the inconvenience and assault that Bruce Wayne is receiving on their end. That conflict is completely thrown out the window because it's already a 2 hour and 15-minute movie, and they've wasted the first hour on two Barrys bickering at each other. So it's really just, this is where Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne, does the spaghetti theory. He uses first uncooked parts of spaghetti and then crisscrosses them and says certain points in time will be identical, but they're all different universes. He doesn't really get into the boiling aspect of it, at least not that any of us noticed on the watch. But then he pours it all in. He's like, yep, now you'll have a whole bunch of others that look almost identical, but not. They'll be parallel, what have you. And then he throws in tomato sauce and, says, boom, you got a big mess, which is quite quite fourth wall breaking, very meta, because that's what this movie is. It's a big mess. And then of course, younger Barry, who's got that higher metabolism, is looking at the spaghetti, and Bruce Wayne just says, "Here, eat." And we get young Barry eating, and we also get another part which I should have mentioned earlier, which is that Barry is a slob when he eats. He's always got some sort of sauce or thing on the corners of his mouth or lips or chin or what have you. And it's supposed to be funny, but it's not. Anyways, Bruce says that he's not going to help them because he doesn't care for some reason, really just for plot contrivance. And so the Barrys are kind of eventually asked to leave Wayne Manor, and they do. But then they find the well entrance to the Batcave. They sneak in that way, and then Barry starts using the Bat computer to try and find where Superman is. And in his efforts to do so, he falls asleep. Bruce Wayne decides to shave, get a haircut, find where Kal-El is supposed to be, and offers to fly the three of them to that location, which happens to be in Russia. So it's just, and then it just gets into everything that you've seen in the trailers. They find Supergirl, and they do this one thing, which I think is really betrayal to Batman, which is they find Supergirl and it's not Superman. And Batman's like, okay, let's go. And Barry's the one that says, no, we got to save her, which is kind of weird because I think it would be both. I think it would be younger Barry that says, okay, let's go. And then Batman and Barry, older Barry, should be like, no, we're here. We're taking her. She looks horrible. And it's a very, very dumb scene. It betrays the character of Batman, and it kind of builds up Barry artificially. Supergirl is emaciated in this little pod, but she's wearing the prison garb, but in the same room is her Supergirl uniform. So I'm not sure why she's wearing the prison guard stuff when they've tossed in her other clothes in there to begin with anyways. Makes no sense at all. It's really like they just had no idea how to say, well, where does she get the costume from? So they just put it with her, but she doesn't wear it. Instead, she wears this very humiliating outfit inside. But whatever, they carry her out. They make their escape. She gets supercharged. She helps rescue them. And then they take her back to Wayne Manor. She then gets dressed, flies away, meets Zod. Well, not really meets Zod. She sees him from a distance when he's facing off the army and not there. And instead of actually charging into fight and challenge or hand herself over to save the planet, she flies back to the Batcave where Barry is trying to recreate the lightning accident that he just did with younger Barry to get his powers back so that they're all of them. And then they do, and then they go back and they fight Zod and they lose multiple times. And then Barry, before I get into this point, we also get to another convoluted aspect. Barry manages to find a way to kill Kryptonian by vibrating his hand through the chests of the larger Kryptonians, and it kills them. So the movie now establishes a rule that Barry can win. All he has to do is vibrate his hand through all the chests of the Kryptonians and defeat them, and Earth is saved. But that idea is completely ignored or forgotten, so that Barry can go into the Speed Force and basically say, oh, I got to go back in time. I got to fix things because the world is always going to die. Younger Barry doesn't want to do that because he's now in love with Sasha Calle's character for reasons, even though he had a hot date with Iris the day that Barry took him to get his younger self powers. He's completely forgot about her, which makes him even worse character. And the two have a little argument that he doesn't want Barry to go back and essentially be the reason for his mom's death. But younger Barry keeps going in and failing, and he gets all this Kryptonian shrapnel in his body. And that's when the Black Flash, the Dark Flash, comes in. And it's Barry like 30 years older, covered in the metal. And he's basically saying, like, you let mom die, and I can't abide by that because you're my hero, but I'm not stopping until I fix it. I guess he forgot that he could vibrate through all the Kryptonians and kill them. And so younger Barry realizes that the Dark Flash is his older self, and he sacrifices himself, thus creating all the other, thus saving the multiverse, as it were. You get a couple of clips of various transparently desperate cameos, digitally created cameos of George Reeves, of an actor playing a black and white Flash that never existed in the George Reeves era. You then get computer generated Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater, Superman, Supergirl, followed by voiceover of Adam West with a couple of stills of his body from a random episode. And then you get only a cameo that makes sense if you ever followed Superman in the 90s and early 2000s and saw John Schnepp's documentary, which is a computer animated Nick Cage as Superman fighting a giant spider. Wow. Glad that movie didn't exist. Yeah. So that's basically what ends up happening. Barry, younger Barry sacrifices himself, thus killing older Barry, which violates the rules of the very multiverse they said, because it's just, this is the only time where time travel has consequences that affect the future, apparently. Even though you'd think, oh, he kills younger Barry, but this should be another Barry from another universe that had the same thing, blah, blah, blah. But no, they completely throw it out the window because it's a crazy mess. So Barry goes back in time, dresses up in a disguise to say goodbye to his mother, and take the can of tomatoes out of her shopping cart. And then he goes to return it, looks at the row of tomatoes, looks up at the security camera, and then we cut to him returning to his present, which is another thing. And he has to go to court. So he does a super speed to court. He steals the hot dog from the director, Andy Muschietti, which I can confirm is probably 100% the only scene that Andy Muschietti shot that was 100% his, that probably didn't cobble together other directors' productions earlier. Goes into court. The lawyer presents the new evidence that exonerates his father because all the tomatoes were moved to the top shelf instead of the middle shelf, thus forcing the father to look up towards the security camera and prove that he was not there, that he was not at home at the time of his wife's death. And the 20 years he's spent in prison are now going to be expunged. Well, I mean, he still have had served them, but now after 20 years in prison, he is exonerated. He is freed. He'll probably be suing the city or the state for for millions upon millions of dollars. And Barry feels like, oh, he's found a way to still fix it. He has not learned the lesson of not changing things. And it ends, of course, with George Clooney with a full beard, greeting Barry, and then it cuts to the credits, which is a very childish take of the of a healthcare dog animal falling from the nursery in slow motion as Barry in the background is saving everybody else, and then it's saved. And it's supposed to be funny because of all the weird faces that the dog is making, but contextually it just doesn't work. And then we get our post-credit scene where Barry and Aquaman, the last two that are surviving from the Snyderverse, are leaving a bar where Barry's trying to tell him what's been going on, and Aquaman just passes out into a very large puddle in the street, and saying, "This is where he's going to be." And that's the movie. That is the Flash, which I'm going to be calling the trash for a while now. And you'll notice that there's no real antagonist other than Barry himself to a degree. The villain is kind of glossed over. Almost like there is no villain. It does remind me a little bit of Across the Spider-Verse, where the Spot is introduced and then he's kind of put into the background for the majority of the film, and now you have the conflict between Miguel and Miles. But that was it. That is the stuff that is frustrating because it is a very incoherent film. So I'm going to see what you guys are saying in the chat. We've got, oh my gosh, we got Nick Allanen for 50. Wow, thank you. Says, I don't mean to interrupt. Keep going. Your insight is my favorite on Midnight's Edge. Well, thank you. Or Valiant Renegade. Well, thank you. Or whatever show you're on. Thank you. This is just my thank you for the entertainment. Well, thank you so much for the super chat there, Nick. Much appreciated. I'm glad you enjoy my commentary. If I do get anything wrong or mistaken, please point that out to me. I'm not perfect, so yeah. If there's anything I missed that you saw that you thought was needed to be addressed, please let me know. Next we have Angelo Frederick. Hello, Angelo. Good to see you again. Says, keep up with the fight, script. WLM all the way. Writers' lives matter. Go script grow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just gonna proceed here, see what else we've got going on. Yes, there were some CGI babies that were absolutely frightening. Very poorly rendered. Reminded me of the dancing baby thing that we saw on various commercials, and I think they even reincorporated into an episode of Alan Beale. Darren M's in the chat says, hit that like button and share the video out. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If you have subscribed, check to make sure you still are. Yes. Yeah, if you've enjoyed this stuff, please, keep watching. Click that sub button if you haven't. And if you don't want to, I'm not going to be offended by it. That's cool. We have Neil in the chat says, looking forward to this. I listened to Mahler's coverage on this movie, and it doesn't sound very good. Oh, yeah, I bet Mahler did one heck of a job on this. Well, we'll see what happens there. So that's all from before. That part. Let's see what else we got here. Dr. Sleep says, is it me or does Rebel Moon look like a Battle Beyond the Stars ripoff? It is. I think he's admitted that. It is his Battle of Beyond the Stars, which is also the Magnificent Seven, which is also the Seven Samurai. And visually, it doesn't look any different than any other Zack Snyder films visually, so I'm not really too keen on that. We have Doug, 1985, loves horror. Says Man of Steel 2 should have come out after 1, then a Batman solo film, then Wonder Woman, then a Justice League 2-parter. That would be a better plan. I'm not big on the 2-parters personally. I don't think you need a 2-part story for a Justice League origin film. That's just me. Oh, excuse me 1 second. I just got a little stuffy here. Sorry about that. Didn't want you to hear me have to blow my nose. Let's see here. We got Kitty Bear says, I'm not going to watch the Flash movie for a movie about speed. It takes way too long. It took way too long to make, too. We have Shinatsky says, microwaving babies is the new nuke the fridge. Well, luckily, the microwave was not plugged in. That's the only thing I could say from that. It's still crazy. Still very, very crazy. Setlick Gaming for 10, thank you. Says, thank you for what you do. Well, thank you for participating and talking, participating in the chat and everything. It's great to have you all here. We got 67 of you. I was never expecting this many people to be watching me rant and cover the terrible plotting of the Flash or the trash. But I'm so happy to have you all here. So yes, happy there. We got Rob Altus. Says, hello, Script Doctor. Great review. Your insight is particularly informative and appreciative. It's great to hear a writer's perspective. Yes, unfortunately, there's not as many of us volunteering that perspective to the rest of the world to remind our fellow writers and especially the producers and those that hire us that you have to do more than just be a yes man to the person who is writing your checks. And don't get me wrong, it's a very difficult position to be in when you are contracted on an assignment job to write something like The Flash, and you're told to put all of these things in there. And in some cases, arguing that it's going to increase the budget isn't always going to work, because sometimes they just don't care, especially with a movie like The Flash with a 10-year history. Money has been spent since day one on that. So imagine 10 years of constantly spending money on production, development, storyboarding, previs, models, costume designs. All of that stuff has been being spent constantly. Whatever the reported budget is, I'd add another 150 million on top of that, and then include your advertising, distribution, and all that other stuff. This movie is never going to make any money. I know a lot of people are trying to throw Zaslav and James Gunn and whatnot as responsible for this film. It was essentially completed before they even got on board, with a couple of little aspects. In fact, I think even some of the reshot ending was done in September. So that's technically before James Gunn officially took over the now DC Studios. And really their strategy at Warner Brothers right now is just to lose less money. So they will say anything publicly that will, on their books, look like they are trying to make sure they're losing less money, which is why, and this is a rule you learn when you get more intimate in the industry, is that nobody ever says anything bad about anything while it's being released. They just don't. They don't care. It's all, this is the best thing I've ever seen. It's the greatest movie ever. Love it. And when you talk to enough people at different times throughout the year, that is the default answer you get all the time. Nick Cage's Sympathy for the Devil, that's coming out soon. Everybody in town is going to say it's the greatest movie ever, best movie of the year, all that type of stuff. It's the way it is. Whether it is or isn't, doesn't matter. That's just what they say. That's what they like to do. Rarely do you get articles in the trade that actually will be a bit more honest, or at least a bit more in line with the general populace that something's not doing well. It took a while for the trades to start talking about The Little Mermaid not performing to expectations. It took many years before they started going after Disney for their mishandlings of things. We have the lovely Six in the chat. Hello. So happy to have you here. I hope you're having a wonderful Father's Day. I hope your dad is happy with your stuff, if they're there. I feel like this movie required extra homework to know what was going on. That's actually one of the things I'd probably say you don't really need to know exactly. The other part too is that it might help, but it's so disjointed, it's so nuts. I think it just might actually end up confusing you even more. Shinatsky says what's worse is they already have the animated Justice League, which does a good introduction in 40 minutes. Oh yeah, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited is a great adaptation of the characters that fit within that animated universe. The first 2 seasons of Young Justice are also fantastic. I'm not the biggest fan of seasons 3 and 4. I think I know that they lost a lot of money in production, so they had to rewrite the stories to be more soap opera-y and standard, not a whole lot of action or movement, and save that stuff for much later. We have Nick Allanen, for 5. Thank you again. Says, I've used ChatGPT and it's kind of amazing. What are the odds you think Hollywood is using it to some degree now, or has been for some time? ChatGPT has only been around for around 6 months. So if Hollywood, at least the level that's currently that people argue is competitive with writers, which I don't believe that's the case at this point. Could be in the future, but not now. If they have been using it, you'd have to take a look at what has been in production since November of last year up until May, end of May, because those are the only shows that would most likely have been able to be used by ChatGPT at the time. I don't think there's many that's coming out anytime soon that has that. ChatGPT is basically the great grandfather of the Star Trek library computer and recall system, the LCARS. You can ask it questions and it can cite information it pulls from the internet between a certain period. It can also give you web links to verify that. But when you ask it to try and write something, it can't do it in the way a human can. Or at least it can't do it in the way a human that understands what copying is and to avoid it can. It can only take something which exists and reorganize it into something else, but it still does not. It's still not the same. It can't compete with the mediocre or good or best writers, but it can compete with the most terrible. And the thing is that it's not going to be. It's in its current state right now. It would be able to replace a studio executive today because it can draw enough data to determine whether an idea would sell in the market or not. Much quicker, much faster, and pretty much for free compared to what a studio exec is supposed to do with their team, which is to take a look at market trends and determine based on the flavor and the content of the pitch if it could sell or not. So an AI system like ChatGPT can already do that right now. So yeah, I'm not worried on that side of things. So we'll see what happens. Mega Wing Zero says, when are you pitching your icon script to Gunn? I'm not. I would love to write an icon script. I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. But no, the odds of that happening are going to be few and far between for now, especially given the writer's strike. Once that strike lifts, I have to start rebuilding a bunch of things in LA again, which is going to take time. And I'm also trying to promote some other people's films that are in need of money to get into production, because unfortunately, they don't make mid-budget movies anymore, or at least the bigger studios don't put as much attention to the mid-budget movies anymore. And we need to bring those back so that we can have another competitive game in town. Six says, I didn't even enjoy the curly fries and sushi I had during the movie. That is a peculiar combination, but you not enjoying curly fries, that's weird. You love curly fries. I love curly fries too, but my gosh, you're not able to enjoy them? That is unfortunate. So let's see what here. Yeah, Setlick 3 Gaming says 10 years is beyond belief. Too many cooks in the production. Well, it's a lot of directors decided to leave for whatever reasons. The 4 previous directors to Muschietti left the project for who knows what reasons, creative differences. I don't know. But they left. And remember, I have to remind you all of this. In the last, since 2000, there's only been a short list of people that have actually headed Warner Brothers. You had Barry Meyer, you had Kevin Tsujihara, and then you had Ann Sarnoff prior to David Zaslav. That's only 3 changes. Kevin Tsujihara was there from 13 to 19. So even in the technical Detective Comics, the DC Films franchise, they've only had 2 different heads for the movies that we are going to see up until the end of this year. Zaslav hasn't, he's greenlit films to be made, but he hasn't actually overseen or done anything for anything new of his regime yet. That's going to be happening with James Gunn. Everything that we're seeing now this year is the remnants of Ann Sarnoff and Walter Hamada, and it's been kind of massaged to kind of work a little bit by the people that, as David Zaslav has put into a point, has appointed only in an effort to try and save money from the losses they know they're going to suffer from these films. That's about it. He's not doing much of anything else. I know a lot of people out there are saying, well, James Gunn fired Henry Cavill. Sorry to break it to you. Henry Cavill never signed a contract. He was never hired. He was essentially misled by some of the people involved in the production of Black Adam. And even though Warner's gave him permission to talk, give it to his Instagram video, and this is how studios think, they are only thinking about the movie that is in theaters at the moment. And they thought, yes, let's have Henry Cavill say he's coming back as Superman and Black Adam because that's good for the movie. That'll make the movie sell. That is what they basically authorized, is that, yes, you can say you're back for Superman and Black Adam. And I'm certain that Henry's former agent was telling him that, no, we're going to make sure you're back for the rest of the series. You're going to be Superman for the foreseeable future. And Henry would have been very happy with that. And a lot of people would have been. I would have been. I would have loved to see Henry play Superman for the first time in his career. But unfortunately, that was not the case. Zaslav already knew he was going to go in a different direction. And and this is what happens in Hollywood. Everybody has a deal or project in the works that has not yet been greenlit, and most likely won't be greenlit, but they'll say it's greenlit. And they're trying to will it into existence, and then it falls through, or at least that's what they say. It falls through, even though it never happened and never existed. So that is just the tip of the iceberg with regards to relationships and deals that are being made in Hollywood. Six says, I predicted 85 million opening weekend. Yeah, it looks like it's probably going to be a little over half that at the end. I think it's at 55 right now with the estimates for Sunday. John Capoli says, oh, come on, Gunn should have backed Cavill, and instead he was in the movie, not Christopher Reeve. And insisted he was in the movie, not Christopher Reeve. Cavill is in the movie. A CGI version of him flying towards people, punching with his shirt off from his resurrection. But again, Gunn does not have as much control over those older films as the head of DC Studios, as you would think. He doesn't. Right now, the mandate is Zaslav needs this to work. Gunn can have his input, but really his focus is supposed to be on the new stuff that's coming out, not the old. That's where the priority is. Shinosky says, I love how everything is James Gunn's fault. Yeah. No, we can start blaming James Gunn when he drops his Commandos cartoon, his Creature Commandos, his Waller series, season 2 of Peacemaker, and Superman Legacy. That is going to be his stuff. We will see how he fares out. One of the things that I can say about James Gunn is that he at least tries to get some heart in his films, some emotion. And if you saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he definitely nailed that part. It was a fairly decent film, one of the better Marvel films. I'm so sorry, Six. Yes, I'm in the same boat as you, so I apologize if that brought up painful memories. But yeah, I won't highlight it here. Oh boy. Well, at least I hope you're having a good Sunday, and I hope you're able to do what I'm doing, which is share some memories. Read by Nature says The Flash really dropped the ball on cameos. What it should have delivered was a multiverse Justice League. What we got were moving stock photos. Essentially, multiverse Justice League would have probably eaten up a lot of time and been very difficult to shoot, given the fact that Warner Brothers was not intending to spend any more money into this film. Read by Nature also says multiverse concept in general has under-delivered in the cinema. Well, the multiverse is essentially another variation of the reboot. Only it's a reboot that doesn't erase the previous stuff. It's basically saying, with the multiverse technique, you can watch all of our back catalog on streaming and video and Blu-ray and what have you. Buy everything that we ever made before because it's all part of the multiverse. Whereas beforehand, when they did reboots, people were like, "Oh yeah, I'll just buy the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. I'll ignore the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher films. I'll just buy that." Now they're trying to get you to say, "No, you got to buy all of them," because they still make money on those, and they want that. Darren M says 55 million domestic takes, 75 million international takes, so it likely will not make a profit. Saving a miracle. It may come in under projections. Let's see here. Well, currently, what I've got here, at least according to the numbers, and I'll see if will it let me share my tab? No, it won't. things being done. Yeah. So it looks like, yes, 55 and 75, 130 worldwide, 55 domestic. So it's coming in under possible projections of under the 60 projection domestic, but that might be revised in the morning and tomorrow morning. So we will see. But 130 million worldwide opening for the budget of what they put behind this is not good. I think they were hoping for ideally in perfect times at the peak of the superhero stuff. If this movie didn't have the history associated with it, if it didn't have the controversial actor associated with it, I think they would have been hoping for a 210, 210 or 300 worldwide opening. So 210 domestically, 300 worldwide opening. So that's that's unfortunate. Neil says the trash is a good name for this movie. What a mess. Also, why the heck did this movie introduce caloric intake and did nothing with it? Limitations is greater than capabilities is what creates stakes. Yes, absolutely. Again, they did nothing with that. It's something that kind of gets ignored in later Flash stories that I have seen. Because he's able to access the speed force and it gives him the power to do what he does. He doesn't need to eat as much anymore, which is unfortunate because I liked the idea of the fact that every time he uses his speed, it comes with the consequences of the fact that he is starving. And that's really cool. It also gets you into another fun problem, which is that he has to spend most of his money on food, which means he has to now budget things. And so you can get into that personal conflict that a lot of us can relate. It's like, oh yeah, we got a budget for a couple of weeks ahead. It's like, so the Flash can end up doing like a number of saves throughout Central City, eats all of his food and looks at his bank account and says, oh man, I'm not going to be able to make rent. That's a fun conflict to have. We have Nick Allen, and again for 10. Thank you, Nick, for sponsoring today's show. It says AI tech has been around longer than it has been revealed, though, as it can be used as a framework with a prompt, then a writer can adjust slightly. Yes, AI has been around, I think, since the late 50s privately. But the framework that AI does is quite poor, in my opinion. I've seen far better results just talking with a human being than with an AI. And I have pushed AI a little bit. I've experimented with it. And it's the only thing I use it for is if I can't find an answer to a specific question through normal searches, I would go to the Chat GPT and ask that question, and then I'd ask it to cite the source. And then I click on the source and read it that way. Otherwise, it's the entire method. And this was actually brought up by a physicist, physics professor, I believe, or philosophy professor in the UK in the 70s, basically said that the bridge between true artificial intelligence and intelligence is something that can't be built or programmed. And that bridge is essentially imagination and the ability to create something from nothing, which is the against protocol for an AI. An AI cannot create something from nothing. An AI needs input. You cannot leave an AI alone and it just happen to generate something on a whim. It just doesn't do that. And because it doesn't do that, and because it can't do that without programming, it will never be truly an artificial intelligence. It will be at best an elaborate simulation. And even an elaborate simulation can be kind of dangerous because it's going to simulate what it is receiving in regards to input of human behavior. And the most poignant human behavior is obviously the most dramatic and contentious. And that's where you get into the Terminator style things. But the entire method right now that I know of what's going on with AI and how it's working is very, very backwards. Ironically enough, Isaac Asimov knew this when he was making the iRobot short stories, which later were collected into a novel, which I highly recommend you read because it's absolutely brilliant and fun. And that is a true artificial intelligence would be most likely a byproduct of a mechanical invention, in this case, the positronic brain. And the only thing that was programmed into it were the rules to restrict harm from the byproduct of AI to preventing it from harming humans. And that's basically it. That was the only programming that you could do. It was basically a digital collar around AI, and it's a very fascinating book. I'm probably gonna book some time to see if I can reread that and then share some decent thoughts with you guys about that, because I think you guys would dig it. And if you don't, just let me know. John Sapola, hey, says, at Script Doctor, just because we could does not mean we should. Exactly. Very wise words. Same type of stuff that you got obviously in Jurassic Park, but also it's the same theme with regards to Westworld that was also done by Michael Crichton way back in the 70s. Great movie, way better than the series because it understands what it was doing. The series, it's Pam Abdi, Jonathan Nolan, a little bit of J.J. Abrams. So obviously they're not going to know what the heck they're talking about. And I hated that series from the get-go. As soon as they made it more about AI instead of the fact that the premise of the story is, AI with a computer virus that turns it against its creators is far more interesting than AI becoming self-aware in a pretentious social commentary manner. So, John Sapola says, Script Doctor, does the writer's strike affect games and comics? Okay, so for anyone wondering if there's any loophole with regards to writers for the writer's strike, I hate to break it to you, but there isn't. So the writers are only striking against specifically struck companies, which are WGA signatories. These are your studios, and these are all your production houses, anything that is signed on to say that they are a WGA signatory, which means that they will only work with and hire writers that are part of the union. It also means that if you are not part of the union, but you sell your script to them for production, you then become part of the union by that transaction. Because that is the deal that the studios have made with the writers. So if that studio owns a game development company, then you cannot write for video games. If that studio owns comic books, then if you're a WGA writer, you cannot write comic books. However, a lot of writers that write comic books aren't part of the WGA, so there's no real conflict of interest there. And that's the difference. And it doesn't violate them because it's a publishing branch of their studio. So no, comics and games are only affected if they are directly correlated and require WGA writers to work on them. So no, you can be fine. WGA studios cannot hire writers in the UK or India or Asia, or other parts of Asia or Africa or Russia or any of those countries without them becoming part of the WGA. It is considered a lockout. No way if or and about it. What studios could do is they could license existing content from other countries and put them on their streaming services because that doesn't violate the WGA, but they're doing that already. So there's no change. Right now, the WGA has locked down the industry. They can't do much of anything. Even the directors right now that I've understood have a very difficult time doing their own work because, one, they have to cross a picket line, which is going to create memories that the writers will hold on to for a long time. And number two, a lot of the stuff that they do as directors, especially for television series, for streaming series, requires the writer input in order to make it all work. Directors, especially in those mediums, don't have as much flexibility or control over the product as you would think. Now, a director on a feature film has a little bit more leeway, but anytime they make a change or give a line, to another actor, they have to revise the draft and pay the writer to do that. So if they're doing any feature films or they're filming anything that is scripted, that's not going to be worked on again, they have to stick to that script and cannot make any alterations. And if they do make any alterations, they're in violation of the strike itself, and that will cause a blowback of problems. And the thing is that sometimes when you get on set and you're seeing the script play out, you are able to see and identify any of the flaws that otherwise would have been difficult to pick up with on the draft. And those flaws need to be corrected. And directors and actors can't do that. I mean, physically they could, but the stipulations of the strike, the rules that are in place right now, prevent them from doing that. So there's nothing going on. Anyone out there listening, you should not have to worry about comics or video games when a strike is on. Just go back into the history of 2007 to 2008. Were there any comic books or video games that weren't being published or produced because of the writer's strike? That's your answer right there. So keep that in mind. You have nothing to worry about in that regard. Rust in Peace is here. Says the 90s were great for what appears to be affordable movies. They were still big. Why don't they go back to that model? Inflation is one of the big ones. Inflation is one of the big reasons that they don't go back to that model. The other part too is demand. So as the 90s came to a close and the 2000s came to rise, there was more demand to get out more movies and more demand to get out more straight to DVD and Blu-ray films. And in order to do that, they had to make one aspect of them cheaper and another aspect of them more expensive. And in the early 2000s, the studios started to realize that if they throw $100 million behind their blockbuster film as opposed to 60 or 80, they were able to guarantee success of making their money back with at least another $100 million in profit. And foolishly, as many Hollywood accountants are, they figured, well, if we double that, we'll make even more money. Forgetting the whole reason that the threshold of $100 million budget film, it was meaning that you had enough leeway and time and resources available to make it the best thing possible. When you double that, you'd expect you have more, but in actuality, you have less, because now that you've spent that much extra money, you have pressure from the studio above you to get the movie done on time and in budget. And when you have to rush things to get things done on time for a predetermined schedule, you end up making sloppy mistakes. And that's where you also end up realizing that you're going to most likely go over budget, because as you're rushing to meet your deadline and you're seeing the flaws on your screenings or test screenings and your renders aren't being fully composited yet, and you're just trying to make that initial scheduled date, you end up realizing you're spending more money than the $200 million budget, or the $220 million, or the $250, or in the case of Indiana Jones, the $300 million budget. It just doesn't work. What really needs to happen, and unfortunately this is a warning that studios said to George Lucas when ILM was starting to take off, which is that you create a tool that, as great as it is and as useful as it can be to really make the movies pop and shine and feel more authentic, it will eventually become abused, especially as it becomes cheaper and quicker to do things. And that is what we are in now. We are in the abuse generation of Hollywood filmmaking, where they can take actors, some one at a time, other times in small groups, throw them in front of a green screen or a stagecraft volume artificial set, shoot their scene, send them off, and then just start bashing in computer effects afterwards to make it look good. They're losing the whole essence. They're losing the verisimilitude. They're losing the magic by relying solely on one technique. One of the things that makes Jurassic Park a fantastic movie that holds up over time is, just like with a magician, they use more than one trick. And computer generated effects and post effects are essentially a one trick pony. You have to mix practical, you have to mix cinematography, you have to mix performance, you have to mix digital effects. You have to find that sweet balance for every shot that you have in order to make it the most convincing thing ever. And at this point here, what we end up having are a bunch of studio heads that want to just funnel it all into one department and have them fix everything. That was a mistake during actual post, as opposed to properly planning your principal photography to get the best that you can out of it. John Zapola says James Gunn is not their savior. Well, we don't know that yet. We don't know. The one thing that James Gunn has that DC hasn't had since before 2013 is potential. So we'll have to wait and see. We will have to wait and see. Mega Wing Zero says 9 years in production hell and this bad. It is what it is. It is what it is. What else could you expect at this point? Any movie that takes this long to make, holding on to this type of concept, which is the Flashpoint Paradox comic concept, it was doomed to begin with. Setlick 3 says, yes, the time delay makes Hollywood behind the times. Hollywood is always catching up. Only once in a while do they actually come out with a movie that is a trailblazer, and that's always by accident. John Wick was one, but that kind of died out pretty quick because there are so many movies trying to copy John Wick after it came out. Because, again, anytime someone stumbles on a gap, an entertainment gap of sorts that people are really dying to have, the studio system just rushes in to try and occupy that gap and get the money from that desire without actually realizing that it's not just the gap, but it's also the quality of the film that came out that made it work. Unfortunately, and this is it's kind of the opposite of that Michael J. Fox movie, The Secret of My Success, where this every job he goes to, they say they want experience, but this kid's like, well, how can I get experience if you don't hire me? And Hollywood has now done the opposite, where they're like, we don't want anyone with experience, just the education, the Ivy League education in business, come into our studio at 22 years old, start making $1 million decisions. And the audiences are suffering for it. The industry is suffering for it. There's no one there with experience, and there's no infrastructure. Appears like there's no infrastructure for the young people coming in to learn and understand how this business works. They're using the current age technology as a crutch to make up their shortfallings in understanding how audiences actually process and gravitate towards certain types of films. It's a byproduct of the fact that influencers have replaced the movie star. So people don't always go to a film because of a certain actor in it. And I'm using actor in the gender neutral term, not for politics, just because I don't want to repeat myself. And because you don't have those actors, those talents that draw in audiences anymore, because they're competing with average, from their perspective, average people on the internet. The only thing they have now is what's more popular than the movie star. Well, intellectual property is more popular than the movie star. That's basically it. Things that have been in the social conscious for decades are going to be easier recognizable, and it's going to replace the movie star. Is going to compete with the influencers on social media, and that's their angle to draw people in. Where ideally, what you would want to do is you'd want to take some of the people, especially the good publicists, which there are few and far between these days, and find actors with talent and charm and charisma, and have a slightly more stable head on their shoulders, which is harder to do because actors, by their very nature, are not very stable people. They want to be the center of attention, and they want to live other people's lives as opposed to their own. But you have to find some that are closer to the more traditional side of things, that are dedicated. They want to entertain, they want to experience, they want to challenge themselves, and they also want to stay out of the low-hanging fruit conversations. And they should be pushed and developed and backed by studios to become movie stars, where people would rather put down their phones and go see them act in a role and take them away to this really cool universe for us as an audience to explore, and hopefully take something from that story back in ourselves that we can incorporate into our lives to either to hopefully make our lives better. An influencer doesn't really do that. They point out to brands, they point to the popularity, they market things that are not that that are lacking substance, essentially. And stories are, when they're done very, very well, have a great deal of substance. They make you think. They make you question, like, oh, what would I do if I was in that position? Or they make you say, yeah, I've been there before. I can relate to this person. Excuse me. Keep sneezing. We got Valiant Renegade in the chat. Hey, doing, sir? Says, good afternoon. Well, good afternoon to you, sir. I can't do your radio voice, but one day I will attempt to refine it. Loving your box office takes recently. They have been on point, and looking forward to catching up and listening to your Sunday night show this evening. Script Doctor, welcome to Hop By later today. Top discuss Flash. Chris is coming also to chat about that and Indy. I will see what I can do. I'm currently, I'm going to be wrapping up here shortly with everyone in the lovely chat. I have a little hangout with my girlfriend and her father for a couple hours, and then I'm going to be coming back here to I think we're going to be playing some Conan with Nina and Jane and friends. But if not, I'll be happy to swing on by and join your awesome show with Chris and the gang, because this is one heck of a terrible film. John Sapola says AI is a fancy term for algorithm. With the way that they're doing it, yes, absolutely. Excuse me. There was another chat that came here. The whole thing just kind of jumped on me. So let's see. That's where Nick Allen says, I only bring it up because AI scares me. AI gives me a great deal of concern too. Not as much on the writing side of things for me. It's mostly on the side of those that would try to value me less. But I have been, me and myself and my friends in the industry, some of them which I was on the Zoom meeting with on Thursday, we had already a few years into working on ourselves independently so that we don't have to worry about AI challenging us. So think of there's nothing to worry about. For if you're a good writer, you shouldn't have too much to worry about, at least for the next few years, unless they come up with a huge leap to AI. For now, I don't think that's going to be the case. Waldemar Perez Jr. says only programs that can self-modify and have self-awareness can be called AI. I think that's closer to meeting that definition. I think that that is there. So we'll see that. And we have 6 who says Valiant Renegade is going live in 3 hours. Go set a reminder. Yes, please. Link for this stream is in the chat, so you can come right back. Exactly. So go check that out. In 3 hours, he's going to be doing his Sunday night roundtable. It's a great one. I highly recommend it. Go check that out. Shanatsky, I agree. Yes, the Westworld TV show welcomes humanity dying off. It's a vile series. Yeah, I was not thrilled by it, and I really liked Jeffrey Wright as an actor. He's just got this gravitas about him. He should be a movie star, like a big draw movie star, but you know, no one's backing him enough. Rest in Peace has a great question here. Says, can directors write their own movies under the rules? No. When a director starts writing, they become a hyphenate. And a hyphenate means that they are like a director, producer, writer, actor. So yeah, if you are a hyphenate, you are restricted from, and any one of the unions is on strike, you are restricted from that avenue of creativity until that strike is resolved. Again, I will say this, I appreciate everyone trying to ask questions to find a loophole. Sadly, those questions have been asked many, many times before by other people decades ago. They've been answered. They've been explored. They've been revised so that they couldn't be a thing anymore. And but keep them coming, because you never know, you might have one. And if you do, and that gets out, it will eventually, that question, that loophole will be plugged by the WGA or the studios, the AMPTP. And Read by Nature says, can't improvise either. That one's a little bit trickier because improvisation still constitutes part of writing. So if an actor goes on set to improvise, and most actors find themselves affiliated with the WGA or members of the WGA because sometimes they write their own passion projects that they get their own production company to produce, and their own production companies have to be WGA signatories. So yes, some actors can't even do that. Darren M asks, if the various AIs try to take over, we make them form committees. That will do them in. It's a Douglas Adams-esque solution. That is one, absolutely. The other part too is I don't think they've solved infinite memory yet. One of the things that I've always had fun when I had the honor to play around with some mainframe AIs is it's also kind of burned some bridges with some of the people, because I crashed AIs before. Because AIs, they cannot be programmed properly to discern what is valuable and what is not valuable information, because one of the aspects of AI in the concept is that everything potentially has a use. So you can feed a couple of prompts into an AI and crash it when it tries to basically copy all the memory of the internet. And until you have an infinite amount of storage capacity that's constantly growing, you will never be able to have a full AI. Because how do you program or teach an AI to know what is valuable and what isn't, and then throw them into experiences where they find out that things that they first thought weren't valuable are, and it causes a causality loop where they can't process information and they crash. It's basically like the problem of like back in the early Windows 95, 97 days, where you plug in your printer and the operating system says it can't print, but it doesn't tell you why. And you check everything and you realize, oh, you just didn't have the driver. But the computer doesn't know it didn't have the driver, because it doesn't think to say, this is what you need in order for it to work. And they're going to be variations of that problem of miscommunication or inability to communicate issues that I think will save us as a species from being completely taken over by AI. That's one of the things I appreciate about human ingenuity. We can kind of figure things out with little bit less information compared to a computer. We have Pinochet's Helicopter Tours. Asks, Script Doctor, didn't George Lucas routinely pay fines on behalf of his writers, directors to control his content? Well, you may be referring to the fact that George Lucas paid a fine for the first Star Wars and the following two to the Directors Guild of America, eventually causing him to leave the Directors Guild of America, because traditionally the DGA required you to put opening credits and stating who the director is prior to the start of the film, not after. And George didn't want to do that for Star Wars. So he paid out that on the first one. Wasn't too happy. When Irvin Kershner was doing Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas did the same thing. And the DGA really, really got into a fight with him. I think they tried to file a lawsuit, but George, and they tried to charge Irvin Kershner to that, but George paid on his behalf. And as a result, he also said, I'm out of the DGA, I'm leaving. And because he left, he was not able to work with Irvin Kershner again on The Return of the Jedi, nor was he able to get Steven Spielberg, who the two of them were actually playing around with the idea of him directing Return of the Jedi. So what he ended up having to do is, because he was no longer a DGA signatory, or at least the DGA contracted studio, Lucasfilm at that point, he was able to hire directors that were not part of the Directors Guild from other companies, and that's how we got the Mark Waid for Return of the Jedi. And I think it was, I even still think when he made the prequel trilogy, he was still not member of the DGA anymore. Oh, no, wait. No, he must have been, because he did ask Ron Howard. So he had to have changed that. Probably re-signed up with them much later afterwards. But yeah, for a good long time, he was not interested in that. Waldemar Perez Jr. says some of the best visual effects movies artificially employ techniques used in magic shows. Yes, they do. Penn Jillette has been hired many times to help a lot of VFX people with some tricks and camera trickery, as with a lot of other magicians. And they're very easy to find because it's not even an hour flight from LA to Las Vegas to go see these guys and get their input. And they're worth every cent. Waldemar Perez says, I read the reason the MCU Phase 4 started to suck was because they were consulting Gunn. Nope. Everything that Gunn consulted on for what was the Phase 4 of the MCU was thrown out when Alan Horn terminated him. So for those that might not be aware, Gunn was going to be one of the heads of the cosmic wing of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Kevin Feige would be focusing on the Disney Plus side of things. Esposito would be focusing on the feature side of things, and James Gunn would be focusing on the cosmic side of things for the features. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was supposed to be the first Phase 4 Marvel film. But that was, of course, scrapped when Twitterati got a hold of his really terrible and inappropriate jokes, where he's trying to be like Richard Kind, trying to be like Paul Lynde, not Richard Kind, Paul Lynde, and Alan Horn overstepped his authority and fired James Gunn, and that's it. Everything that they were working on, they had to toss out or put on hold, and they had to figure out what they were going to do for Phase 4. And Phase 4 was a big rushed job. The only success it had was Spider-Man No Way Home. And the only reason that was a success is because the moment that they learned Michael Keaton was coming in as Batman and in The Flash, that's when they reached out to Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire to get them. Same with Alfred Molina, to get them in their new Spider-Man movie, which replaced their initial attention, which rumor has it was that Tom Holland's Spider-Man would have lost his secret identity, and it'd be a big court case, and just a mess between him and Jameson. So they threw that out, and they ended up going with the multiverse movie. And because they did not have enough time, the window had already been locked in. They did not have enough time to do what Marvel had normally done, which I am of the theory that Victoria Alonso, being the head of post-production, which is an invented position that's not really around anywhere else, and not in the way that in the power that she had, she was not able to order the reshoots and put in whatever agenda mindseted aspects she wanted to in the film because of the narrowed turnaround from production to release. And so that's why Spider-Man No Way Home was the only success that it was. That's my understanding based on it. Sony also, I think, had enough of a say in there on the post-production, because they are essentially licensing out Spider-Man to Marvel, and they get to keep distribution deals and a whole bunch of the money from the box office. But all the crews that work on it are Marvel employees. Excuse me. Gosh, it's very stuffy in here. Neil says the industry really needs to get some serious budget control. They need the financial guy to proverbially hit people over their heads with a newspaper and say no, in my view. Yeah, accountants have been getting less and less influence in some parts with budget managing. But at the same time, they were also a big problem many years before, where just trying to get an extra $2 million to make this one scene work and get it good was also a nightmare. They are a double-edged sword. That's just the way the way it is. So let's see. Darren has said, "Oh yes, check out Nina Infinity." Yes, I believe she's going to be going live to do the Conan stuff later, which will be fantastic. I will be able to confirm that later today, so keep an eye on my Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD. Kitty Bear says, write a game story, then after the strike and game release, turn it into a movie. That's tricky. That require additional negotiations. But that is something to think about. Now, here's the other part too. A lot of the writers, we are not writing for studios right now. We can't. We are not talking with anybody. We are not writing for anyone, not taking assignments. We are not looking at the gaps of things to write now that could be released. A lot of the writers, when they're not on the picket line, they're going back to their passion project scripts, working on those, and then they're just keeping them to themselves privately. And until that strike is resolved, they will not be shared. They'll not be distributed. They'll not be pushed as pitches or anything of that nature, because if they are, the WGA will turn on them. So there's going to be an appearance of a spec script gap after the writer's strike has been resolved for maybe a couple of months. And then we're going to get a massive competitive flood of all these writers submitting their original screenplays to studios for funding or sale. And then we're going to also get, conversely, a massive flood of assignment work out there for writers to pitch their takes on, to try and fill in those projects. So it's going to be, if the strike gets resolved before the fall, which I think it will be, it's going to be one heck of a ride. It's going to be another panic mode, in my opinion. There'll be some things that kind of knock it out of the park within whatever budget they are, but I don't think it's going to be on the tentpole side of things anytime soon. Not until at least 2025, maybe late 2025, early 2026. So it is causing a little bit of a delay, but it will be it'll be something. Okay, so let's see. Anything else? 6, to further my point, I have a super awesome printer that will only photocopy now. I wish I knew why. And it's not going to tell you. It's not going to tell you. I've been in that situation too. I've even replaced the ink cartridge, replaced the entire spools, everything. And it still wouldn't print. And even some of the tech guys that I know are like, it's got a mind of its own, so to speak. Gremlins is usually the common term used among them. By the way, Sonosky says, by the way, George Lucas was one of the first guys to go FICOR. They pushed a list of FICOR members, and it reads more like a list you'd want to be on. I understand that too. I know people are talking about FICOR coming now, which could definitely collapse the union. But it's a very tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing. It's not going to be easily resolved. I'm a big fan of I'm a big fan of what the WGA is supposed to stand for in principle, but they don't always behave that way. Ideally, the WGA is supposed to be looking out for you to make sure you're getting your residuals and you're not getting screwed over in a bad deal. And they're supposed to be coordinating with your agent and manager. But like with all unions, they are subjected to a lot of human flaws and a lot of ambition to try and do things which are not necessarily supposed to be within its pure purview. And that causes a lot of contention. But at the same time, a lot of the things that they are fighting for are not unreasonable, given the fact that as the weeks go on and more information is being released about how much the studios are investing and how much they're making over the expenses, it's like, if you want this to really, if you want to make more money, you need to spend a little bit extra to make even more. And some of that comes down to just enforcing that there are minimums that are required just on the basic level, and that from those minimums, that allows the talent that you want to work with to negotiate for the stuff that is far more capitalistic and competitive. And it's just like, it's why I'm a big fan of not necessarily raising the minimum wage, but the fact that there is one as a starting point, because then everybody can come in there. You can get good. You can use your turnover to get the best ones that you want, and the ones that work the best at your business. People who like that and recognize that will reward you as such with raises, with more responsibility, with benefits. That's how I've experienced a lot of work. I worked at a couple of part-time jobs. I worked at some full-time stuff, especially during the 07-08 strike. And I remember working and just doing the best job I could. Never asked for a raise, but they gave me one. They recognized the work and they gave me one. It was nice and it was great. Same thing for the publishing company. I do the job I had, and after every business quarter, they'd be like, "Yep, we're going to give you some more money." That's just the nature it is. I think that's a fair part. And now, if I was working a lot harder and asked to do overtime hours but not get paid overtime, I would actually be upset, because I think that if you're working on an hourly basis and they're not going to pay you for extra hours working on that, you should raise an issue with that. I don't think that is unreasonable. I think if you're hired to work 8 hours and they ask you to work 9 for the same pay, you as an individual should negotiate that. No, you're going to be paid for all of your time, because time is what's very important. And since they argue that time is money, that is your grounds to say, you're right, time is money. So if you want my time, you got to pay. Simple as that. Joey Shaz, The Flash is a kids movie, period. Not a good one. I love writing stories for kids. And one of the things I learned very early on is when you're writing for kids, you are actually just writing for adults. And you're just keeping it clean, because kids, one thing they want to grow up. And why do they want to grow up? Because they know and they're somewhere in the back of mind, it's inevitable. And the other part too, is that they see their parents and other grownups doing things that they're not allowed to do, and they desire that freedom. So when you are writing for kids, remember, you're also technically writing for adults, because if they really, really love that kids show or that kids movie, they will go back to it as they're older. And when they go back to it as they're older, if you did your job well and you threw in some interesting adult situations, not grotesque adult situations, but like grown-up responsibility situations, they will start appreciating it a lot more. And, that's just what you do. Don't write like Caillou. That is a creepy show. We got Darth Plato, who's here, says, "Hey, Script. Hey, Darth Plato. Glad to see you. Happy that you're here." Doug 1985 says, "Forrest Gump is the best movie ever." Forrest Gump is a very interesting movie, because Forrest Gump is the narrator. We get little snippets of his lives, but we're seeing character arcs for Lieutenant Dan and Jenny. And it's a really well done film. That one has some great computer compositing effects in it. I highly recommend checking it out. It's a very sweet story. You feel very sorry for the guy, but you also have fun with his take on history. I do recommend the book, but it is not what you think. It's not what the movie is. Robert Zemeckis took his own leeways on that. So we'll go from there. Six. Oh my gosh. 6 cents, $25 says, "When did you get monetized? Membership's coming?" I got monetized, I think, in April. Things were changing at YouTube in around that time. And beforehand, I was monetized, then I wasn't for some reason. And then there's some weird contradictions where I had all these watch hours, I had all these subscribers, but I wasn't qualified, but I had no flags or strikes. I don't know what it was, but April, they remonetized me. And so, yeah, I'm monetized. As for memberships, I could do memberships. What would you all like to see as memberships, or membership perks or privileges or anything of that nature? Tweet me on DM or leave a comment on this live stream, and I'll do that, because this is YouTube is still a new world for me, even though I've been kind of doing it and guesting on live streams and whatnot for a few years now. But let me know what you guys would want. and we'll figure out a way to do it. I'll be happy to of course do that all. Yeah, give me, I guess memberships also have like emojis and stuff like that. So yes, go to town, guys, in the comments. Let me know all the things that you would like to see, and I will happily explore all that and see if I can facilitate that for you all for membership. Thank you so much, Six. And excuse me. Yeah, Six says, yeah, that line about sex that Barry says is what I want to take my kid to. I agree. I agree. I thought that was, yeah. Oh, I don't want to dwell on that anymore. John Zapola says, Script Doctor agreed. I do not know who Flash was written for. Flash is a, as Andre would say, a Frankensteinian cobbling of dead parts mixed together. Excuse me. Pinochet's Helicopter Tours for 5 says, not to put you on the spot, but do you offer do one-off consultations advice? Have you worked on documentaries, approached 4 different factual serial content versus TV? Oh, so one, I do have a consults. So there are 2 options. You can DM me directly for my rates, or you can join my Patreon, in which case you at the Prime tier and above, if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to double check. I offer discounts to my consults, which are factored in based on the your membership. So yes, from Patreon Prime tier up, you get discounts and access to me, in addition to Zoom calls and chats where I can we have a conversation over your stuff. I also provide notes as well. Yeah, I love doing that stuff. Have I worked on documentaries? I've worked on 2 independent documentaries, which are a lot of fun. Not so much as a writer, mostly as a producer, getting it through, and approach different 4 factual serial content versus TV. So yes, and I also can discuss with you how to do long form serial TV versus episodic TV as well. I have a great deal of experience in that, and I am always happy to work with any and all of you out there that are wanting to refine and better your stories and work. I recently got an endorsement from some guy who I guess works for some of the digital publications. He wasn't going to be a client, but I was happy that he gave me a shout out. Yeah, I'm happy to read and help you out. You can send me a DM, or you can email me at thescriptdoctorphd@gmail.com. Copy of the email is also in the about section of this channel. Just let me know what it is you're looking for and what days you are available. And if my schedule lines up, we book you in and we go from there. And I'm always thrilled to see what other writers have. I love getting inside your heads, reading your work and whatnot. And I also take in a lot of precautions to make sure that your work is protected under yourself, because I know a lot of new writers are always worried about theft. I can confidently tell you that theft in Hollywood is not as frequent as you think it is. It's actually really, really, really rare. And the only ones you have to worry about are from the people you've never heard of before, like that work on movies like produced by Asylum. Like Asylum is known for stealing stuff. So don't worry. Don't worry about this here. If you have any reservations with regards to that and looking at your work, one of the things that I do offer, which is great, is a recorded Zoom section where we talk about your script and the details of your script. You get a copy of that to use as you wish. You can throw it up on YouTube. You can throw it up on Twitter. You can do whatever you want. You can even throw it up there and make fun of my advice for your own gain. I am perfectly fine with that. It just further solidifies the proof that the story you wrote is yours. And if you ever see a no-named writer or writer you never heard of that did it and you think it might be me, go after them, because number one, it's not going to be me. And number two, yeah, come up with your own ideas. Darn it. Like don't take the ones from my clients or the other people. Just work on your own stuff, because if you end up selling it and they ask you for another great idea, if you can't deliver, you have to try and steal again. And guess what? It's not going to work out in your favor. People are going to catch on very quick. And that's why studios, especially studios, are much more interested in buying a script and working with that writer because they can get more money out of them over a longer relationship than just stealing it and making it themselves, because it never works out to their benefit. Excuse me. My gosh. So yes. So that's pretty much it for this. That's my take on The Flash. That's my take on your wonderful questions. Thank you, everyone who has been sticking around with me for a little over 2 hours now. I'm so happy you are here. Thanks again to Nick Allanan, Angelico Frederick, Setlick Gaming, Six, and Pinochet's Helicopter for your donations today. It's greatly appreciated. If you want to see more of these types of streams, just let me know in the comment sections, or send me a tweet or Twitter DM, whatever. I'm happy to try and get this sorted out for you. On my Patreon, you can sign up for a 7-day free trial and see my awesome conversation from Jeff over at the World Class Bullshitters, where we talk web shooters and Spider-Man. And please leave a comment and interactions with that as well. And thank you again for hanging out with me. I hope everybody out there has a wonderful Sunday and a wonderful Father's Day. And until then, I'll see you guys much later, either for some Conan gameplay later tonight with Nina Infinity and friends, or maybe over on Valiant's channel. Either way, you can't go wrong with watching either of them. They're all great, wonderful people. And having said that, thank you so much, everyone. And never forget, when it comes to a great story, it all starts with the